Hamas urges the international community to act against settlement expansion and aggression in the West Bank. Israel's finance minister calls for Hamas elimination within months and warns against early elections. And Russia and Ukraine conduct second prisoner exchange following talks in Istanbul last week. Hamas has called on the international community to take responsibility for the ongoing settlement invasion and aggression in the West Bank. They urged for the isolation of the occupying entity, demanding accountability for its crimes and violations of international law. Additionally, Hamas encouraged the Palestinian people to escalate confrontations with the Israeli occupation across the West Bank to thwart its colonial plans. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza since early morning have killed at least 46 Palestinians. Al Qahira News correspondent has reported that 32 of the victims were waiting for aid in central Gaza. Other fatalities were reported after Israeli forces bombed tents sheltering displaced people in El Mawasi, west of the Khan Yunis, and in areas north of Gaza City. Artillery shelling also continued in southern Khan Yunis, targeting several areas. At least 20 Palestinians were killed and more than 100 injured after Israeli forces opened fire near an aid distribution site in Gaza, according to the Palestinian media. The attack occurred near the Netzarim corridor, a key military route cutting through Gaza. The 6-kilometer corridor established by Israel during the war isolates Gaza City and northern areas from the south. Despite the danger, Palestinians continue risking their lives to access desperately needed aid amid rising hunger and hardship. The assault marks yet another deadly day in Gaza's deepening humanitarian crisis. And Israel's finance minister says humanitarian aid should not reach Gaza and insists military operations must continue. And Smotrich reiterated his opposition to aid deliveries into Gaza, calling the war extremely difficult. He said the Israeli army seeks to weaken Hamas by controlling Gaza's population. Smotrich also stressed the need to destroy Hamas's military capabilities. The World Health Organization warns Gaza's southern healthcare system is near collapse, with Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis now the only ICU facility in the area after Israeli strikes shut down El Amal Hospital. As Israeli attacks continue across southern Gaza, including near aid distribution points, Nasser Hospital is overwhelmed with patients wounded while seeking food and supplies. The facility is operating beyond capacity, now serving as the region's last critical care center, raising fears of a deepening medical disaster. Far-right Israeli National Security Minister Ben Gvir has stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque, accompanied by senior police officers and settlers under heavy Israeli police protection. Entering via the Moroccan gate, they roamed the mosque compound with some performing Talmudic rituals. That came as around 100 officers secured the site, barring the Palestinians from entry or prayer and seizing IDs of worshippers present. Swedish activist Greta Thunberg has returned to Stockholm after being deported from Israel. She was among a group trying to break the naval blockade on Gaza. Greta Thunberg landed in Sweden after Israeli forces intercepted a small aid ship she boarded with pro-Palestinian activists. The vessel was aiming to reach Gaza but was seized by the Israeli Navy. Thunberg and 3 others accepted deportation, while 8 members of the group remain in detention near Tel Aviv, pending a legal challenge. At Arlanda Airport, Thunberg was welcomed by supporters and accused Israel of committing systematic violations of international law.
Vi behöver mer ilska när världen är så fruktansvärd.
And for more analysis, we now move to Henny Saif in our newsroom. Hello, Henny.
Hello, Selma. Ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by Dr. Meher Safi, the political analyst, speaking to us from Cairo. Welcome to Qnews, Dr. Safi. What are the legal and humanitarian implications of Israel's repeated attacks near aid distribution points in Gaza under the international law?
Good evening to you and your viewers. Israel is committing massacres and horrified and making great mistakes that all the laws, humanitarian and international law, that prohibit the killing the civilians, and that's as it happens in all the distributions point since the beginning of the killing trap managed by the American Foundation, supported by Netanyahu's office. In addition to hundreds of serious casualties, yesterday we witnessed directly bombardment upon those who are hungers that Israel caused their starvation. So Israel is committing a systematic killing by striking the tents in Khan Yunis and the north of Gaza, and commits a great of appalling deeds against civilians and striking their homes on their heads. The international laws should issue memos as did before, and Britain has already issued sanctions against Smotrich and Benazir, but what is left is to be implemented on the ground. What's happening in the Gaza Strip is a systematic genocide targeting evacuated land from its residents, either by starvation or bombardment. Since these bombs that are sent by the US that used the vetoes for 6 times to prevent and refrain the ceasefire and even entering in the humanitarian aid. Many children are suffering dehydration, that are at the brink of there's more of the elderly people, women and children are facing the most horrible crimes through these starvation. Since the repeated strikes, Israel is committing the most appalling crimes against the Palestinian people from the north till Rafah.
Yes, well, sir, how does the Israeli policy of controlling aid access, keeping in mind some statements are coming from ministers opposing the aid, the delivery of aid altogether, how does it affect the humanitarian situation and the potential war crimes assessments?
Israel is trying as much as possible, even if they enter the humanitarian aid only in a few amounts that targeting humiliating the citizens, killing them during their pursuit or seeking for humanitarian aid. All the claims of Israel that entering the humanitarian aid, they never delivered since the beginning of such a trap. The Gaza Strip is in need of from 500 to 600 trucks. I think the absence of law and accountability, as Israel is trying to convince the whole world that they deliver the humanitarian fuels and the needs required by the residents of the Gaza Strip, and what is quantities only a drop in the ocean. I think still Israel is deceiving the international community and undermining the main role of the UNRWA in distributing the aid, as they are the most capable and responsible to do such under the UNRWA. But Israel nor America do not wish for the refugees or UNRWA as well as the Food World Program to have a great role to save what has been left from the Gazan people that they are suffering from killing and starvation.
Dr. Safi, what strategic role does the Netzarim corridor play in Israel's military operations? How does it impact civilian movement and the aid delivery into Gaza?
I think that Netzarim corridor as similar points being designated in Morag corridor and Dawar al-Alam in Rafah and other areas that through which they distribute the aid and the ruling the people into the Netzarim, whether they are coming from the central or the north of Gaza. So Netzarim corridor is witnessing several of continued killing against the young people, women and elderly people, seekers for the food, that barely 10% of the Gaza residents are getting such a food. And I think the Morag and Netzarim more alike are doing the same purpose, the political purpose drawn by Netanyahu and the American Foundation in luring the residents into such a point. So it was much probably to have throughout the Gaza Strip such a distribution point. Those are coming from everywhere to receive the food, either from Netzarim or different areas, and I think there is no point for such a point that I call death traps that would lead, that would require investigation for such a deed. The absence of these people are when they are seeking the aid. So it was probably to have a comprehensive distribution throughout Gaza Strip, not only through Netzarim and other points designated by the GHF.
Dr. Meher Safi, the political analyst, joining us from Cairo. Thank you very much, sir, for your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, now we go back to Selma in our studio. Selma, over to you.
Thank you, Hani. And Egypt has welcomed the international support for the Palestinian rights and condemned Israel's systematic violations in Gaza. In a statement by the Foreign Ministry, Egypt reaffirmed its commitment to ending the aggression and the humanitarian catastrophe. Egypt stressed that foreign visits to the Rafah border must follow official procedures and prior coordination for security reasons. It also urged full respect for entry laws, reaffirming its rejection for the Israeli violations and its call to lift the siege and allow humanitarian aid. French leftist groups have accused their government of sending weapons to Israel since October 2023. A coalition of French left-wing parties and organizations claims the government has been supplying Israel with arms and military equipment. France's Armed Forces Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, denied the allegations, saying no weapons were sold. Israel's finance minister says Hamas should be eliminated within 2 to 3 months, warning against early elections. Speaking in the Knesset, Smotrich admitted growing domestic and international pressure to end the war in Gaza. He argued that calling elections now would be responsible and said the toppling of the government mid-war threatens Israel. Russia and Ukraine have carried out a second exchange of prisoners of war following talks held in Istanbul last week. Moscow and Kiev exchanged another group of prisoners on Tuesday under a deal reached in Istanbul. Russia's defense ministry confirmed that it is returning soldiers who are now in Belarus for medical and psychological support. Ukraine, meanwhile, announced the return of wounded troops from its military, police and security services. Officials say a third phase of the exchange is expected soon. Russia says it's prepared to help remove excess nuclear material from Iran if both Tehran and Washington agree. The Kremlin confirmed Wednesday that Russia is ready to assist in removing surplus nuclear material from Iran. The offer made by the Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov includes converting the material into nuclear fuel. Moscow says the move could help bridge gaps between Iran and the United States over Tehran's the assistance useful. The European Commission has proposed a fresh round of sanctions on Russia, targeting key sectors including energy and finance. The European Union is reviewing its 18th sanctions package against Russia as tensions persist over the war in Ukraine. The proposed measures aim to tighten restrictions on Russian energy exports, including steps to prevent the reopening of Nord Stream gas pipelines. The draft also seeks to expand the list of ships in Russia's so-called shadow fleet, with sanctions targeting over 400 vessels and around 70 aging oil tankers. EU member states are expected to begin formal debates on the proposal this week. And moving on, France's president is pushing for a Europe-wide ban on social media access for children under 15 after a deadly school stabbing shocked the nation. President Emmanuel Macron said he would push for the EU regulation to restrict social media use by minors under 15. His remarks came after a 14-year-old student fatally stabbed a school aide during a back search in eastern France. Macron blamed the social media for fueling youth violence and said France could act alone if the EU fails to respond quickly. The attack has reignited debate on school safety and online influence on teenagers. NVIDIA's CEO says Europe's AI capacity will surge tenfold in 2 years as the chipmaker expands its presence across the continent and doubles down on quantum computing. Speaking at the Viva Tech conference in Paris, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang said Europe has awakened to the need for AI infrastructure. The company is setting up AI centers in 7 countries and plans to build the world's first industrial AI cloud in Europe. Huang also announced a partnership with French startup Mistral and said quantum computing is nearing a breakthrough with the potential to solve problems beyond today's AI capabilities.
You're so smart. You're so smart. Well, incredible, right? Order.
Inter Miami and Egypt's Al Ahly are gearing up for their Club World Cup opener, with FIFA's president and football legends attending a launch event in Florida. Inter Miami coach Javier Mascherano and Al Ahly's Jose Riviero spoke ahead of Saturday's Club World Cup opener at the Hard Rock Stadium. The match will kick off Group A and the tournament itself. FIFA President Gianni Infantino and Ronaldinho attended the launch in Coral Gables. Miami qualified after winning the MLS Supporters' Shield following Lionel Messi's arrival. Al Ahly booked their place as the African champions. And Australia have booked their place at the World Cup after a 2-1 comeback win over Saudi Arabia in Jeddah. And Tony Popovic's Socceroos needed to avoid a heavy defeat to qualify, and they did it in style. Goals from Conor Metcalfe and Mitch Duke overturned an early Saudi lead, sealing Australia's 6th straight World Cup appearance. Abdurrahman El Aboud opened the scoring for the hosts, but Metcalfe equalized before half-time. Duke struck early in the second half, and veteran keeper Matty Ryan, on his 100th cap, saved a late penalty to Oman kept their World Cup hopes alive with a dramatic 1-1 draw against Palestine in Jordan. Palestine looked set for victory after Odi Kharoub's header put them ahead early in the second half. Oman were reduced to 10 men when Harib El Sadi received a second yellow card, but a stoppage time penalty changed everything. Mohsen El Ghassani was fouled in the box, and Issam El Sabhi converted from the spot to rescue a point. The result keeps Oman 4th in Group B and ends Palestine's qualification hopes. And Manchester City have confirmed the signing of Dutch midfielder Tijani Reinders from AC Milan on a 5-year deal ahead of the Club World Cup. The Netherlands international joins City for a reported fee of €55 million. Reinders made 104 appearances for Milan, winning the Italian Super Cup and earning Serie A's Best Midfielder award last season. The 26-year-old signed a long-term deal with Milan just 3 months ago, but now heads to England, where he'll be available for this month's Club World Cup campaign with City. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, and here's what we have been covering. Hamas urges the international community to act against settlement expansion and aggression in the West Bank. And Israel's finance minister calls for Hamas's elimination within months and warns against early elections. Russia and Ukraine conduct second prisoner exchange following talks in Istanbul last week. And this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. And don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.